Wednesday, May 1, 1754. Governor Leopold Loop's advance guard of 35 men march ahead of an army of over 200. Their destination, Freetown, a Petit Blanc settlement which has recently fallen under control of a slave revolt. Their objective: retake the settlement of Freetown and relieve the trapped whites of their black oppressors. Their purpose: to eliminate the gathered army of the slave revolt, a large and organized force consisting of the Pinnable Islands slave population and other dissatisfied islanders who sit camped on the other side of the valley. Sir James Jackson, the leader of the slave revolt, and commander of the Center Guard, former member of the French colonial army in the Americas before being sent to the Caribbean to command the Pinnable Islands militia. Former military experience, several Iroquois raids 2 years prior to being transferred. Described as a knowledgeable man, willing to offer his helping hand to any slave in need. Strong supporter of the abolition movement. Edmund Lancaster, former Navy seaman of the HSS Fitzgerald, now notorious pirate and commander of the battle's left flank. Previous combat experience: a naval boarding of a Spanish trade vessel, killing the captain with his cutlass, 4 years ago. A strong-headed man who has a strong opposition to French colonial rule, is willing to fighting against the crown at any motive. Known to his men as Dumissa, which means, causes thunder, for his heated antics.
I have no worries of this revolt. After seeing what my countrymen did to the slaves of this colony sicken me the most. I am sure my men here have the same opinions regarding the matter. This will be motive enough to ensure that the men are of fighting spirit and sound of mind.
But sir, we heard reports from the French side from our colleagues that they brought horse and regulars. Shouldn't you fall back and regroup to fight another day?
No. We cannot simply wait around and hope that the French won't find us. Me and my men are sick and tired of waiting in the jungles. The time to fight is now, while the men still watching. Also, I heard these regulars you speak of are nothing more than a rabble in costume. My men are prisoners of war. Their time fighting for their kingdoms in Africa will more than well pay off. I know the life of a slave took away their spirit and gusto, but I am sure they will remember their job and purpose. Their lives surely depends on it.
It is this army that opposes French rule all over the island. It is not a government that forces them onto the field, but rather a common goal, and that goal is to escape their bondage, and become free from the crushing Caribbean slave system. With most armed with simple farming implements and spears, many are simply in the field in order to fill out the ranks, thus, hopeless in the face of a competent foe whose job is to fight and die for their king and colony. The French forces, numbering around 200, it is a force that consists of French colonists and soldiers who are inhabitants around the island and surrounding French-controlled colonies. They are brought together in hopes of putting an end to the slave revolt. In this army are 4 companies of colonial militia, 2 companies of plantation militia, 1 squadron of cavalry, supplied with around 8,000 musket cartridges. Marching along with them are 2 3-pounder light guns from the Colonial Fort Armory, carrying 50 cannonballs and 15 bags of grapeshot and cargo. The battle forced the many members of the island's plantation to provide soldiers for the colonial army. These men are guards, stewards, handlers and laborers from plantations across the islands including the Loop Sugar Plantation, the Blackgate Sugar Plantation, and the Dutch-owned Speak Tobacco Plantation, to name the most prominent plantations. This is Toussaint, a chain maker for the Blackgate Sugar Plantation, now a soldier of the island colonial militia. Age, 24. Days in service, 2. Previous combat experience, none.
Why are you here?
Mon patron un jour m'a tendu un mousquet et m'a dit de suivre les hommes qui venaient dans notre plantation. Je n'étais pas le seul puisqu'il prenait tous ceux qui pouvaient tenir un mousquet et n'avaient pas été blessés pendant la révolte. J'étais désemparé.
Toussaint is one of the dozens who were forced to enlist in the island's militia. Few have never held a musket here, but very few have fired, let alone reloaded one under battlefield circumstances. This man is an appointed French naval officer, ordered by the governor to command the enlisted French colonists. He has no relations to the men he is leading, and thus, agitated and nervous.
How many men do you possess?
Moi, je pense que, bien plus de 40, je dirais, tous des hommes durs, habitués aux brutalités de la guerre sans aucun doute. Ce n'est pas la première fois que nous devions réprimer une révolte d'esclaves, vous entendez?
But I've talked to one of your men who says he's a chain maker, and has never used a musket before.
Quoi? Bah, absurdité. Je connais mes hommes, je sais qu'ils se sont battus avec des esclaves, chacun un homme.
This man is a member of the colonial militia, being a part of the white middle class of the island. Many of these men are compliant with the system they are subjected to, and therefore are motivated to rout the army this day in order to return to their normal lives. These men embody the ideal European tactics practiced throughout their career and are the best representation of this fighting style on the battlefield today. Each man is armed with a standard pattern musket, a bayonet, a side sword for melee, and over 25 musket cartridges. Their purpose in the field is to drive away the slave army with their numbers and firepower, a common tactic which is used throughout Europe and their colonies, yet untested in the tropical conditions. These men are deserters of the colonial militia. These freemen fought, trained, ate and died together in previous colonial wars. Now, with divided politics and allegiances, if they were to be caught or surrender to the governor, they would be convicted of treason and hung, regardless of previous ranks and relations. They no longer fight for abolition, but they fight for their lives, as losing means certain death.
What was your motivation to desert your post? Why are you fighting against your comrades?
I fight because I despise how they treat my countrymen. I see them being marched through the street every day, being whipped and hung and dragged by a rope. No more. I am outraged. I was ignorant. But no, I am not. That is why I am standing here and not over there.
My master tried to have us killed when he heard of the revolt at the Loop plantation. He said he was going to line us up and kill us if we step out of line once. Once it happened, we all ran, and never turned back. Once we made it to Freetown, they gave us spears and told us to get into line.
It is the grim reality for some in each army. Some people are unwilling participants, forced to fight, either at gunpoint or spear point. Many men who make much of the slave army are simply escaped slaves with no other option, as running now would mean death, or a fate worse than it. These are the men who are given spears, pitchforks and axes as weapons rather than muskets and cannon. On a field like this, they ought to stand no chance.
I was running for days in search of sanctuary. My former master visited Kaunza and me and my companions. I am unfortunate to say that one of my friends did not make it. I knew that friends in well were both in Barbados. For that, I am thankful.
We've heard reports that the French are bringing cannon to the field. Is this true?
What? No. I never heard of such thing. I have never used cannon in battle when I was in service in the Caribbean. I assure you that no cannons are being used today. No, sir.
As the battle lines form on each side, the slaves' right flank is being battered by French cannon fire, which remains constant throughout the battle. The advantage of possessing guns offsets the numerical advantage Jackson was hoping to exploit. With no other option, he orders an army-wide charge directly into the French center.
The center. Send militias onto the side. Skirmish order. I want the horse. Wrap around the army. Attack people on the flank. Cannons. Cannons on the side.
The battle soon devolves into a massive melee. Slave against colonist. Many slave commanders encourage their men to charge headlong into the forest of bayonets, but some lose courage only feet in front of their enemies. Others, however, make contact, and a bloody fight ensues. Midday. The slave army appears to be shaken. Many slaves begin to turn and run back into the jungle, hoping to avoid the governor's unit of horse. It is a slaughter for the slaves. James Jackson, former leader of the slave revolt, died alongside his men after being surrounded by the governor's men. Reportedly fell to the ground after receiving a bayonet in his stomach. His men fled soon after.
Now that this business is concluded, I might be able to return to my plantation without too many problems with the slave we find. Freetown will fall within the day, I am certain of it. With some blood on my sabre, I would say this was a good day.
How do you feel after these events?
I don't feel quite much actually. I was given orders to do something. And I did it. I killed 2 of the deserters when we were firing at them, and another when they charged us. Now all I want to do is lay down and have a nap and try to forget about all of this. Mon arme n'a pas tiré. Mon patron m'a donné un faux pistolet. Je suis resté debout pendant toute la bataille et j'ai prié pour qu'une balle ne me tue pas car je n'avais rien pour me protéger.
With the slave army in disarray, the French colonial army had achieved their goal and purpose today and have finally restored order on the island and surrounding area for the time being. With the remaining slaves who were captured or killed in the battle fleeing, it is now the job of the gendarme to spread out in the countryside and to capture any routing slaves or others for enslavement, regardless of previous status. Having led his army into destruction in under an hour, James Jackson is left among the rest of the bodies on the battlefield. Although he had failed in routing his sworn enemies and countrymen, he planted the seed for further resistance to the slave trade. This ultimately was the goal, regardless if the leader survived or not, as his legacy did not die with him. Now, within the month, another slave revolt will occur. Not on this island, but in another, which will trigger another, and so on. This is the slave system, a vicious cycle which repeats itself upon the defeat of a slave revolt, the high point of the cycle. It is an inevitability for those invested in the system as pent-up grievance and anger is let out through the revolts. And when they succeed, there is little to do except to beat them back, or allow them emancipation. Both are chaotic scenarios for some perspectives.